We want to show you some other functions that are available that we really didn't feel like fit very well within other aspects of the training. So Ashley, take just a few minutes and let's walk through the end-of-day procedures that we were discussing.
Okay, we're going to quickly go through a full cycle of the day, cashiering in, cashiering out. And the first thing we need to do is understand that there are a few top-level security settings that we want to implement before we get into the employee security settings for cashiering. And we're going to need to be logged in as administrator for some of these features. And once we are, we're going to go into the options screen again, into setup. And we're going to go over here to the system access button on the screen. And if you'll notice on the left-hand column, there are several features here that are related to cashiering in. Number one very key important feature is the default cash drawer start. Now that's just when you initially start cashiering in for the day, what the default start amount that's going to show up on the screen is. That can be altered by your cashier, but you're going to know if it's a straight $100 or $200 cashier in every day. Would leave them the liberty to change that if things fluctuate slightly from day to day. Another key feature here is the blind recount if drawers over or short. Now that gives you a threshold that if your cashier comes up short or over by the specified amount, then you can force them to do a recount on their screen with an override option for the manager. Those are the key features on that screen. We do want to look at the time clocks tab in that grouping as well, because there are a few other key end-of-day features. There are options for how we handle if we try and close out the day while staff are still clocked in. We would usually want to force them to clock out so that we can cover our time clock and our hourly wage fees and all that, and close all that down with the end of day. But you can handle that a few different ways right here in this radio button selection. Now, the other thing that we can do is we can deny or allow end of day closeouts with transactions that are still on hold. Usually, generally speaking, you're going to want to close those out before you go on with those procedures. Another key feature for your manager, the person who's actually receiving all of the input, all the cash drops from all the employees, is the end of day require money count option here. There's 4 options for how you allow that manager to receive those cash drops for the employees. We can do an option where it does require them to do a basic money count. We can require them to also provide a blind money count, or we can just assume that it's correct from the sum of all the cashiers counts from their own blind drops. So we're going to leave that on yes, require money count. It's a pretty low security, but it's still a little bit of accountability for your management. And I'm going to click update if you make any changes to those. And that's how you do the global settings for the cashiering process. Now we need to look at actually how you go into the individual employees and set them up to force cashiering in and cashiering out. We're going to go back to the options screen again, administrative and employee maintenance. And at that point, I'm going to go and select an employee that I want to force through this clock-in procedure. Now, the big things that we want to do is, first of all, we want to set up a job code setup if we haven't done that yet. And the key features that we need to do whenever we assign this, we have one pre-built here that says cashier. And we need to make sure that it says access to POS is checked. We also want to make sure that we check the box there for cash bank and require cash count screen at clock out. Now those are listed there. They've already been selected. If you are initially doing this, you're going to want to click update and make sure you save those settings. And then you're going to go back to the employee screen here. You're going to select the job codes and wages tab, and then you're going to actually go in here and apply that particular job code to the employee. Now this has already been done for this particular employee, so I don't have to do that. Another final setting that must be done for this whole process to work correctly is that you need to check the box there just above the job codes and wages tab that says require clock in before login, and that button's going to actually make the whole process start for the employee. Now we've got all those features done, and we're going to log out as the administrator, and we're going to pretend just briefly here that we're going to log in at the first part of the day for this cashier. And so I'm going to log in as a different cashier from the administrator. As soon as I try and do that, I'm going to get a big red box here that's going to force me to acknowledge that I do want to clock in. Now when I do that, I haven't set a default starting cash drawer amount, so I'm just going to put in right now $100 for a starting cash count, and I'm into the system. And I can run all my daily transactions. And I'm just going to run one here, one or two real quickly. Just for example's sake, obviously, they'd be going throughout the day. whatever their time period is. All right. Now, at the end of the day, that cashier needs to clock out and count their drawer down. So we're going to clock out. Now, at the bottom right-hand side of the main login screen, that is where the clock in, clock out button is. If you have staff that are not required to clock in, clock out, just to operate the system, they can still come down and access that function from here. In this case, this employee is clocking out so that they can cashier out. So it's a required function for them. So we're going to log their username and password. We're going to clock out, and now we're actually coming. It's going to pop the cash drawer, allow them to count down their change. So I'm just going to, put something in here. Hopefully somewhere in the range of where we were with the transactions. Now I've got $140 counted. I'm sure it was a little more than that. I'm going to add one $50 bill just to make this a little more realistic. And when I click OK, it's going to ask me if I'm sure that I'm done counting. I'm going to say yes on that. And it's going to complete my clock out at that point. And it's also going to, if I have it set up, I'll print out a final receipt. I didn't have that feature selected in this case, but we'll be able to do that. You'll have you take your money at that point, put it in the drop bag, and hand it to your manager for count. Now, most times your manager, whoever's counting down the drawer, is going to be able to access the system at this point. And they're going to make sure that everybody's cashiered out for the day. Everybody's handed them their blind counts. And they're going to go in here. We're going to go to the Tools section, and then there's the End of Day button. And they're going to click that. It's going to generate the final End of Day report. And it's also, if depending on the security settings for the manager, will determine whether or not they need to count the money again and hand that in with a final receipt to the owner or something to that effect. Now, if for any reason you don't, the person that's doing the final count at the end of the day doesn't have different security access from the cashier, say one of your cashiers is required to do the final count for your entire store, they wouldn't be able to log back in to some of those buttons and close the end of day that way. They would actually be able to go in here to the File menu from the main login screen, and we can actually run an end of day report directly from there without having to log in. And so I'm going to do that. And at this point, it's going to ask, it's going to tell you what the expected deposit amount was. And here again, these settings are dependent on the security that you set for your supervisor's end of day count. I'm just going to select OK for this time, confirm it, and we're done. I actually do have an end of day receipt that printed out for this count. Oftentimes we're going to have a full page receipt or there's several different ways that we can have these reports to print out in the system, but this is just one example for you of what an end of day report might look like.
And you can see that's a very vital report, and it's a vital process in actually closing out your daily activities. So that was all of your end of day reporting.